Okay, gang, I think it's that time. My name is Matt Youngquist. I will be facilitating this third installment of the UW PCE Transformation Tuesdays webinar series. I'm not sure how many of you have been to the last several of them focused on LinkedIn. I'm sure we have a few folks who have, a few newbies. But regardless, in the last 2 weeks, we've covered a lot of ground with regard to LinkedIn. And tonight I'm going to move on and give you my best thoughts about resume strategy, resume construction, and kind of solve a lot of the common confusion and contradictions that come with those documents. So just a few points of order to get started. As with the past sessions, you are welcome to type in some questions as we go using the Q&A box. For this particular webinar, I will tell you up front, I think I've, knock on wood, I think I've anticipated the vast majority of questions about resumes because I deal with the issue all the time. How do you handle gaps on your resume? Should you trim out early jobs? What do you do if you don't have formal education? So you're welcome to ask, but I can virtually promise you, nearer the end of the session, I'm going to be tackling a lot of those very, very common questions I think many of you have. So we've got about an hour of formal material I'm going to share, and then the final half an hour-ish will be reserved for just other Q&A, anything else you have about questions about resumes, and I'll stick around and answer those, okay? Again, for those new to the party here, UW PCE is going to be placing a recording of this session as well as the slide deck up on the same page that you are RSVP'd to join tonight. So you're welcome to take notes, but we're going to have all this documentation, everything waiting for you and accessible. Let me think, anything else? So as far as we kind of ease into here, so I've been doing career coaching now for about 25 years. I had no idea what it was when I got into it. I didn't even know it was a thing. I just got out of University of Washington myself, needed to get a job, and I had kind of studied to go into advertising and copywriting and that kind of thing. So I fumbled around in the early 90s, had no idea what I was doing. And as luck would have it, I got hired by a very small startup that was doing executive career coaching. So I just came in, was doing grunt admin work, data entry, really basic stuff. But the more I watched my boss and mentor coach people and I learned about job hunting and careers, I became really fascinated by it because I don't know about all you folks, but I can certainly say, well, I was a pretty good student back in the day. I didn't know the first thing about careers, job hunting, or any of that. It wasn't a skill that most of us ever get taught. So I got out there with almost no knowledge of how to go about marketing myself. Now, these days, I do think schools and some places do put more resources into that, more effort. I guess this class is living proof of that. But I still know for many of you, the job hunting process is really, really frustrating, confusing, and something you're looking to learn more about. So that's why we put these sessions together. Tonight's really a focus on the piece of this I've been doing the longest, because shortly after I started in this company as an admin in this former company, I started taking on resume writing. So I've lost count of how many 10,000, 15,000 resumes I've written. And to this day, again, I just feel a lot of sympathy for job hunters because there is so much conflicting information about resumes out there. And I know many people really hate writing them, quite honestly, and have a tough time with it. So I'm going to do my best to kind of help you with that tonight. Let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so let's first talk about why is resume writing, for most people, not all, but most people find it a pretty stressful process and pretty intimidating. So the first thing I would tell you is that everyone's an expert. If you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different opinions on resumes. And the reason is because there is no perfect resume. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. In one sense, my opinion is no more valuable than yours. If I'm hiring and I like shorter resumes with humor in them, but you like longer, more detailed resumes that are very conservative, that's your choice. You're the hiring manager. Someone just said they cannot see my screen. We had this issue last time. It says I am screen sharing. Can other people see the screen?
I think we had some participants who said that they could see it. So I feel like
we did earlier. I'm starting to share. It's telling me it's sharing on my end.
I think you're okay, Matt.
I got lots of people. I got a mix. Now they can, now they can, now they can. Okay. Seems to be the curse of this webinar is everything's running fine. Okay. So it sounds like I think everyone's saying they can.
This is how we do this.
Okay,
Um,
there's a gremlin that, all right, seems like everyone can see it now. Thank you,
okay.
everyone, for chiming in. All right, so as I was saying, everyone's an expert, and if you have any thought that you're going to write a resume that everyone loves and never gets any critique, I can just tell you I haven't seen one or written one in 20 years. So you first got to give up that thought that there is some perfect right answer. The second thing I would say is I know it's really tough for some people because you're not good at tooting your own horn. A lot of people hate bragging about themselves or even just, sharing the positive things they've done. So if you're a very humble person, writing a resume can be kind of hard. Not that we want to take it so far and have some arrogant resume that says you're the best marketer who ever lived, but even just a little bit of saying what you have done, you might have to work on that or get over it, because at some point, right, you've got to put your best foot forward and at least state some positive things about yourself. But for some people, that's of course harder than others. It also can be hard, those of us of a certain age and hair color, if you've worked for 20, 30 years and you're trying to recall things you did 15, 20 years ago, much less last Thursday, it can be tough. And sometimes you have to go back to performance reviews, colleagues, hypnosis, I don't know. But, one of the hard parts is if you haven't taken good documentation of it, is trying to remember what you might have accomplished or got done years and years ago. And you just got to do the best job you can at that. Okay, another point I want to make is, I hate to say this, but my industry is very unregulated. And there are some awesome resume writers out there all over the country for sure. There's also a lot of scams. There's a lot of predatory companies, overseas companies, job sites that have like a resume service attached to them. And I certainly don't know them all, but I can say an awful lot of them, in my opinion, do blatant fear mongering. They'll basically say, send me your resume for a free evaluation or a free critique. And they write you a note back that is pretty much a form note, even though it doesn't seem like it. And they know all the buttons to push to make someone think their resume is terrible and they should spend a ton of money to redo it. And it's not that some resumes should be professionally written or that's a good investment. It's just what I warn people against are just automatically assuming any criticism you get off a free website is good criticism. Because again, a lot of these places, I've seen people who do that, and they'll show me this critique their resume got, and they're like, oh, they made some great points and they really read it carefully. And I'll go to my drawer and pull out 5 of that exact same critique with other people's names on them. Because I said, these people are smart. They know what most job hunters are insecure about. So just be on guard against that, against scams that are just trying to sort of scare you into redoing a resume. If you are going to hire a writer, just ask good questions, get references, ask for examples of the work, stuff that just gives it a little more credibility. Okay, and then lastly, and I can't stress this enough, this is not what probably some of you want to hear, but I would honestly say my biggest resume tip of all is not what you're expecting. It's the point that most job hunts, the make or break issue, in my experience, is not usually the resume. Sometimes it is. Sometimes people have resumes that are so terrible, they're the problem. But much more often, I see people thinking their resume is not good, but the problem is it's not the resume, it's what they're doing with the resume. They're not sending out enough, they're not networking enough, they're not following up, they're basically their job hunting strategy isn't very good, right? So in the old days, I think it was more common to just send out resumes, cross your fingers, and expect to get some calls. But now it's a lot more, hustling and numbers game and stuff like that, because it's gotten more competitive out there. A really good way to put that, what my mentor drilled into me, is he said, job hunting is sales. You're selling yourself. The resume is the brochure. Does anyone know a great salesperson who says, you know why I'm such a great salesperson? I've got this pretty brochure I carry around. No, what they're going to say is I network, I build relationships, I hustle, I am very structured, and I see a lot of that going on. So resumes do need some help in a lot of cases, but I'd also encourage, if you're not having much success, to look at, what you're doing with the resume, and are you doing enough things like networking and other strategies, okay? Someone did ask the question, is it not unethical to have someone else write your resume for you? I hope not. Then I'd be a very immoral person. No, I think like any other service in life, outsourcing something, whether it's your taxes or lawn mowing or resume writing, is totally fine, as long as the resume writer doesn't make stuff up. I mean, you've got to make sure whatever they put on the page is honestly you. But yeah, millions of people do get resumes written, and many people can do it totally by themselves. But if you needed help, they're out there. And the next question, Felix, you asked a question. I'm going to answer that one later, I promise. So hold on to that thought. Okay, a few opening things about resumes. The dirty little secret of resumes, the one thing that cracks me up because I so rarely see it mentioned in resume books and resume articles, and it's good news for some people and it's bad news for others, but virtually all the studies I've seen that look at resume effectiveness, as well as if you really talk to most hiring managers, what they tell you, which is again, not what every resume writer wants you to hear, is the cosmetics, the appearance, all the stuff most people agonize about, this word or that word, or what tense should I use, or should I use bullets or paragraphs? All the stuff people worry about is a tiny drop in the bucket compared to what really counts. What most managers look at is the facts. Where have you worked? For how long? What were your titles? What industries have you been in? What education do you have? And that's where most of their decision is based on. So if Microsoft is hiring a financial analyst, for example, and you're applying to that job and you haven't been a financial analyst in the tech industry, sadly, it's going to be hard to win that game, because that recruiter is likely going to say, oh, geez, I got 150 resumes. I don't have time to read each one for more than 10 seconds. So I'm going to give the preference to the people who have a background as close as possible to this job, who have done the same job recently in a similar industry. Now, there's exceptions to that, and networking can really break down those silos and things like that. But see, my point is I never see that talked about. The appearance and all that, the cosmetics are not as important as a person's actual background. So that's a lot of the time when a resume isn't working, it's because people have issues like that. They're returning to the market after many years off. They don't have a college degree, things like that, which make it tougher to get considered. And I usually have to tell them, you're going to have to do a lot more relationship building and networking to offset the less results you're going to get just sending resumes in against a stack of other resumes. In fact, there was a study done on this next slide where the ladders.com, one of the big job sites, hooked up a whole bunch of recruiters to some devious eye sensor technology, and they had them screen a stack of resumes, and they heat mapped where did their eyes go. So what you can see on this graphic, the red is where they really spent the most time, and I know you can't really see the background, but if you squint. So what it shows is they jumped right down from the top and they looked at what current or recent jobs did someone do, what's their most recent titles, companies. They then go back, they spend a lot of time on education. And then each of these red spots is mostly the titles and the companies. So they're really quickly looking at where have you worked, what did you do, where have you worked, what have you do, what's your education. That was what they looked at first and probably made kind of the first cut. And then hopefully went back and paid more attention to some of the other details. But see, I've both seen these kind of studies done and anecdotally talking to managers and recruiters, I hear a lot of that too, that's, the facts are what matter most, not the cosmetic types of things. So for whatever that's worth, keep it in mind, okay? A couple questions. Let's see. Should one build a master resume that includes everything you've ever done, all jobs, training, workshops? It sort of depends. It's not a bad idea. If you have that much stuff to work with, you might want to master one that you then just refine into different, slight, more targeted versions. If, some people don't need a master resume because everything they've done fits on 1 or 2 pages. They don't need more than that. But if you're asking that questions, I suspect you're someone who probably might have that kind of all-inclusive resume and then just kind of customize it a bit. Typical resume writers charge, I haven't benchmarked others, but I would say $200 to $500 is the most common rate, and most higher than that, I really get a little iffy about, is it a scam or something else going on? But I'm just speaking from my own experience there. We're going to definitely answer the next question about 1 page, 2 pages, human readable, scannable, employment gaps. So a lot of these questions coming in, like I said, I've anticipated them all, and I have some slides later that we're going to talk about those, okay? But what I want to spend a good chunk of time on, and this is just my attempt to bring some sanity back to this confusing process. In all these years, I've been talking to recruiters, talking to resume experts like myself, talking to hiring managers and begging them, what do you want to see on a resume? Help me write good ones for my clients that'll get them hired. There's only 5 key things I can get them to agree on, or that there's pretty much universal consensus. After these 5 rules, there's 100 judgment calls that there's total disagreement. Should you put hobbies on a resume? Half the world likes to see them, half the world doesn't like to see them. Should you trim out your early jobs? Half the world thinks that's a good idea, half think you shouldn't. So what I want to get you focused on is my best advice to you tonight is really pay attention to these next 5 slides and the fundamentals I'm going to teach you. And if you make sure your current resume passes these 5 tests, it's already going to be in the good, very good, or great category, because these are the 5 most important things. And again, many resumes violate one or more of these 5 things. So that's the best I'm going to be able to tell you, is just give you a series of rules of thumb to follow here. And I'm going to show you examples of resumes as we go that kind of demonstrate some of these conventions. Okay? All right. So the first thing most people agree is they want a resume that looks good. Now, that could mean 100 different things, 1,000 different formats. So when you say, what does that actually mean? What makes a resume look good or look bad? Here's the guidelines I would give you. Nobody wants to see a resume anymore that's more than 2 pages unless you're in academia. If you're a professor, you're going to be writing a curriculum vitae that can be much, much longer and has every research paper you've ever done. But for general professionals, 1 to 2 pages maximum. There is a strong trend these days to 1-pagers, shorter, sweeter. But that doesn't mean if you have tons of experience, if you're a manager, that you can't go to 2. I would say most people with 10 or more years of experience still have 2-page resumes. But if you can condense yours down to 1 page without sacrificing anything critical, that is sort of the trend today. But as far as I'm concerned, again, 1 to 2 pages, you're fine. Just don't go more than that unless you're a PhD in some academic subject. Okay, obviously you want to stick with standard fonts, Times, Arial, Cambria, Calibri, just anything, standard business correspondence. You don't want to use anything wacky like Jester or Comic Sans or cursive fonts or anything like that, okay? So there's other fonts in those 4 that you could choose, but those are, I would say, the 4 most common fonts people use on resumes. Okay, you want at least 10-point minimum. Even that's a little small. I would start writing a resume probably with 11-point font, and if you're getting tight on space, shrink some of it down to 10-point. If you're trying to fill space, like if you're a new graduate or someone without a lot of experience, maybe go up to 12-point. But 10 to 12 points, I would say, is generally the right size. Margins, I tend to like denser resumes, so I tend to pack a lot on a page. But I would say at absolute minimum, you want 0.4 of an inch top and bottom and about 0.7 left and right. I would say most people have 1 inch left and right and maybe 0.7, 0.8 top to bottom. That's kind of where you start. That gives it good white space and all that. But if you're really fighting to get a shorter resume or just have a ton of stuff to cram in, those would be the minimum margins I'd recommend before I think it crosses over into like microfiche or unreadable. Okay, there is a preference by most managers for bullets instead of big block paragraphs, but there are exceptions to that rule. So if you overuse bullets, if it's like every single section, your education, your summary, your jobs, if everything is bulleted, then there's no point of bullets because bullets are supposed to emphasize things. So the most common thing people do, let me start showing you some examples here. Okay, so the most common type of resume, I'll pick a couple of these, is you write your job description with a short paragraph that just kind of describes, here's what I did in my job, here's my responsibilities, and then you use the bullets underneath to highlight the accomplishments, to pop out the real mini stories and highlights and things like that. Okay, so that's the most common way to do it. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way. Let me show you one more here. Okay, all different formats, but again, here's, let's put this top little part as a paragraph, not a long paragraph, and then use some bullets. So you can mix and match, but I wouldn't have all bullets and I wouldn't have a whole bunch of great big paragraphs because few people would want to digest and read through all that. So you want to use bullets kind of selectively, but that's kind of the general approach to that, okay? Obviously, you probably do want section headers. So you're going to want a section for like job history, maybe key skills and qualifications, education, volunteer work. So just make sure you have some kind of dividing line or something between sections because that helps the reader quickly find what they're looking for. What I tend to do a lot, let me see if I can find you an example. If I'm trying to cram a lot of stuff on a resume, like a 1-pager, let me see if I can find a good example here. What I'll kind of do is I'll down at the bottom have a section that says education and additional information. So what I'll put in that bottom section is a bunch of odds and ends: education, training, certifications, language skills, software proficiency, just kind of a grab bag at the bottom. So if you don't have enough room to have different sections for each type of data you're trying to put in your resume, that's an acceptable way to kind of lump some stuff together. But you see, again, everything is just separated. Here's my opening summary. We're going to talk about that. Here's a list of key skills. So it makes it really easy for that reader to get to the stuff they want. Okay. What else do we got? A lot of people think resumes need to be really flashy. Like they've seen ones that have all these colors and graphics and infographics. And, some people buy templates that look like that. Some pay resume writers a lot of money, or graphic designers. I'll tell you though, in all the years, I haven't met hardly any manager or HR person who likes to see those, unless that is your job. If you're a graphic designer or a visual designer, then that resume is kind of a portfolio piece. But for all the rest of us that aren't designers, as tempting as it is, see, what these people say is, when you get an overly flashy resume with all these columns and stuff, they say, I can't scan that into my resume system. It can't find the stuff. It's all chopped up, or they themselves have trouble finding the information they want. So others may disagree on this, but I'll tell you my stance on that, as you'll see from a lot of my examples here, is there's 100 different formats you can use. And I usually put some little touch of color in there, like a navy blue bar or here, but I don't overdo it. I don't put columns and color and graphics on it, because again, I don't want people to have resumes that don't scan well. Okay. And then some people take it to a crazy extreme. You're going to get a chuckle out of this one. I've seen people do, they do things like this. And this is an example of what I'm talking about. This is a resume that is very, very designed. It's got boxes and shading. And I don't necessarily mind this. I'm trying to find the thing that'll show you the whole, there we go. So I don't necessarily mind this. It looks kind of cool at first, but again, most managers say, I don't really need something like this because it's kind of hard to read. And then what's funny is when you really look at it, like down here on the bottom right, they've got these, whatever they're called, these rating scales for your expertise. And even that, I kind of chuckle and I go, according to who? So you're self-rating yourself. And of course, you're not going to give yourself less than a 3 on anything, right? So it kind of, at first glance, well, that's kind of cool and modern, but just in actual practice, I don't see a lot of companies really needing that. So you'll see these kinds of things. If you want to pay somebody to do that, or if you find a template, you can try it, but they're not as appreciated as I think people or resume writers would like you to think. A lot of companies, you submit your resume, it is turned right into straight text. All the graphics get immediately lost. And then there's the people, last but not least, who do some really, really funny things. This is my all-time, not favorite resume, but favorite creative resume. So the one My Little Pony resume theme. So years ago, I found this one, or someone sent it in, and as you can see, it's a person, they're not even a designer or a toy manufacturer. They're a computer programmer, but just for kicks and giggles, they wrote a whole resume around the little kid's My Little Pony thing. Now, in fairness, I actually like this. I give this one a little credit because it's original and they really went all in and did it thoroughly, versus a knockoff or something. So I'm not recommending you put little ponies on your resume, but I just wanted to show you some people do try to stand out with this kind of color and flair and personality. It's just not something most candidates are expected to do. And I haven't met many people who want to see it. Okay. All right, and I'm seeing a lot of these questions coming in. Most of them I'm going to answer later, so bear with me. The margins I suggested earlier are they the same as the narrow setting in Word? I can't remember the exact narrow setting in the layout menu of Word. It's close, but since I don't know it exactly, I would just compare the narrow setting against the ones I'm recommending. I can't remember exactly what they call narrow on theirs, okay? Everything else I see you asking, I'm going to talk about later. So, okay. So where were we? Back to my slide. In almost every other country in the world, you put a photo on your resume. On LinkedIn, you should put a photo on there in most cases. So weirdly, on resumes, you do not. Unless you are a model or an actor, you don't generally put a photo on a resume. And the reason is, right or wrong, HR people and companies don't usually consider photos on or resumes with photos because they could be accused of discrimination. So a lot of them have a standard rule. If they get a resume with a photo, they put it in a not consider pile. So it's strange because why would you have one on LinkedIn and not on your resume? Don't ask me why, but that's the convention, unlike most of the countries of the world, okay? And then someone asked the question, where can you find resume templates? Where if you just Googled resume template, you'd find a ton of them, most of which cost money, 50 or $100 or something like that. So if you're looking for a new format, you can always just Google that. What you can also do though, let me show you here, close all this stuff out, is if I go to the internet and I just go to Google here, let me pull up a Google window. Okay, so if I go to Google and I just type resume templates, okay, free, if I add the word free, then that certainly brings me some I don't have to pay for. I don't know if they're quite as good, but you can look. But one other thing you can do is do resume templates and go to the images tab on Google, which I use all the time, because if you shift to images, as most of you probably know, that shows you graphics. So if you have enough skills in Microsoft Word to maybe recreate something, you could go in here and just start looking at hundreds and hundreds of examples of what other people have come up with, find one you like the look of, and if you have the skills or know someone who does, you could try to sort of copy it. So there's a ton of free examples in Google Images if you just type resume samples. They're not in editable files like Word or something, but again, if you just got the look of it and found one you liked, it shouldn't be too terribly hard to recreate it, or even pay someone who's like an admin professional could probably recreate it for you in 20 minutes, that kind of thing. But again, there's lots of bad samples on here too that violate some of the rules I'm talking about. Someone asked, if you're being asked for a CV from a company in the European Union, India, would you add a photo? That's a good question. I don't think I would, because even if overseas it's more common, I don't think they need it, and I don't think they expect US people to include it. So I probably wouldn't myself, but I could always ask them and just say, I'm going to send you my Americanized resume. If there's any other information you need on it, photo, or, I mean, a lot of countries in the world ask for age and height and weight. It seems crazy in the US, but it's other countries do that a lot. So you might just ask the person who's requesting it, what else do you need, if anything, beyond what's on my Americanized resume? I would suspect most of them will say, no, that's just fine. We mostly just care about your work history and education. Oh, and someone made the great point. Thank you. Microsoft Word and Google Docs have tons of free resume templates built into them. My only hesitation on those is those are so overused. Like so many people's resumes use those Microsoft and Google Docs. You'll lose a little bit of credit for originality, which may not be a big deal. But yeah, if in a pinch, check the Microsoft template thing or Google Docs, and you'll see a bunch of templates there. Good, thanks for reminding me of that. Okay, last thing I want to tell you on layout is if you are using a resume that has some more fancy graphics, you can always create what's called a text-only resume and just use that version when you're uploading it online to job sites and scanners, because a text version just strips out all the graphics and is just plain text in a file. So scanners tend to work with it a little easier than a resume that's got a lot of formatting in it. All you have to do to create one of those, you could even just Google how create a text-only resume, and there's a million tutorials, is what I do is I just take my pretty resume, my Word document or whatever, I copy everything in it, I paste it into either Windows Notepad or Apple TextEdit, which are two free built-in programs on those two computers, and that strips all the graphics out. And then what you do, you have like a page of just typewritten text basically, and you just go in and hit enter and move a few things around like manually until it looks semi-organized. And then you save it. And then you have your resume.txt. That's your text resume. And that's the one, again, I would use in any case where I'm uploading a resume to some kind of application system or scanner, because those systems are going to turn it into text anyway. So I want it to come in as cleanly as possible. Now, if I'm sending it to a real person, I'm going to send them the pretty version, a Word document or a PDF or something that's got the formatting. But it just takes like 2 minutes to create a text version if any of you decide you need to do that. Okay? All right, let's see. A couple other questions that are relevant to this thing. Columns. I would be worried about using columns, the built-in Word columns. Some systems probably can deal with them fine. Others don't. I do think they trip up some scanners. So I personally avoid columns. I use tabs instead. It may not be the end of the world if you use columns, but I just historically have avoided them because you just don't know what systems can work with them and which can't. Should you bold items? Yeah, I think it's fine to bold items you want to emphasize. I don't think it affects scanners at all. I don't think scanners necessarily give more weight to bold type than other type. And it's not like all scanners are the same. There's dozens of different scanning software that has different pros and cons. So I would bold things for the human audience to catch their eye, but I wouldn't necessarily think bolding is going to do much for scanners, if that makes sense. Okay, what else do we got here? When I say scanners, what I mean is a lot of companies now, especially bigger companies, when you apply to a job, they've either got a piece of software that's going to take every resume sent in and strip all the graphics out and put it in a database and analyze it. So you know, Microsoft, if you apply, a human being isn't seeing it until those 500 resumes get screened by a piece of software that ranks them by who comes closest to whatever that job they're looking for. And even smaller companies, if they don't own a scanner, a lot of the job advertising sites like LinkedIn and Career Builder and Indeed, they have built-in scanners. So even if the company doesn't have one on site, they're still having the resume come in, go through a piece of software online and rank them for them based on keywords and other things. So that's a really common thing today, why I keep talking about scanners, and I'm going to talk about keywords later because that's a big part of that. So sorry for those that not, they're also called ATS systems, or ATS, which stands for Applicant Tracking System, the plain English version. We just, most of us call them resume scanners. Okay. Okay, going to move on from there. Next rule of thumb, I told you there were 5. The second rule is an oldie but a goodie. I wish I could retire it, but most resumes still have typos. I would say at least 70 or 80% of resumes I see have at least some little discrepancy on them. And obviously a company trying to kick people out because they usually have more resumes than they have jobs, they're trying to look for reasons to not consider someone. So if you give them a typo, it just makes it easy for them to say, well, you're not really paying attention to the details. So you have to guard against those. First of all, don't trust your spell checker. They're not foolproof. If you type in the word manger, oh, I'm a project manger at Microsoft, the spell checker is going to say that's fine because manger is a word. It's just not the word you want it. So I see a lot of cases where people have the wrong word accidentally and the spell checker doesn't flag it because it's still a legitimate word, okay? I would say have at least 3 people proofread your document. Don't trust yourself because your eyes will fill in whatever blank you thought was in there. So have other people proofread it. Make sure they don't, I mean, I had someone today who said they thought their resume was perfect and I pointed out one of their dates had an extra 0 in it. And they said they had worked at a job until the year 2001, which I didn't think was true. So it's amazing how much they can sneak by. Make sure your contact info is up to date and correct. A lot of people, this isn't a typo, but a lot of people also now add their LinkedIn address to the top of their resume. It's kind of like a new piece of contact information. So typically today, most people put not their address. I think I mentioned that down below. You don't put your address. You put your city and state. You put one phone number, usually your cell number. People don't want to chase you around multiple numbers. Not that most of us even have landlines. So just usually it's your cell number. You put your email address, obviously one that's a personal address, not a work address, and hopefully one that is not a silly name like, I'm trying to think of one that, you know, goofy woman 23 at Hotmail or something that wouldn't seem professional if you have a name like that. I've also heard, I think it's a little overblown and I don't want to make you paranoid, but there's some camps, especially in the tech industry, that say if you're using an AOL account, a Yahoo account, or even a Hotmail account, that seems old-fashioned. Now, I don't think most of us, I have a Hotmail account. I don't think that's that big a deal. AOL might signal, hey, you haven't, you know, updated your email for 20 years. But just be aware of that if you're using like AOL would be the one, is that some companies will have a bias against that, right or wrong. I've just heard that a number of times. I don't know how much it really happens. You want to make sure all of your bullets are punctuated the same way. So like under each job, let me show you. You know, resume writing doesn't have to follow perfect grammar, right? So you might have short bullets that you don't put periods after because they're not complete sentences. The point is just make sure it's consistent. If you use bullets around after some, make sure you have all bullets. If you don't, have no bullets. So I'll see that a lot where some people in some of their older jobs have periods and their newer ones they don't, and that's just an inconsistency. But either way is fine. Just, go with the style you prefer on that. Your justification, it's not that you can't use like center justification in some sections and left in others, but just make sure the same content. Like if all your jobs, you don't want some that are left justified, where the right edge is kind of ragged, and then the next one down, it's fully justified, where it's got a clean right edge and it's forcing that text right over to the edge of the page. So just check and make sure that you're not inconsistent on that, because that doesn't look very good. Indent your bullets the same amount. I'll sometimes see people with these bullets are pushed in a little and then the next one's a whole bunch. You just want to be, so consistency is most of what I'm talking about here. Whatever hyphens you use in your work dates, little hyphens, big hyphens, the word to, just check them all and make sure they're all exactly the same, that you don't go back and forth. Sometimes Microsoft Word will auto format things. So you'll like type in a hyphen and Word will change it to a dash without you noticing. And then it makes for some of those inconsistencies. Again, why we want people to proofread these. Okay, generally on resumes, you don't use first-person pronouns, unlike LinkedIn, where it's more common. It's not like a fatal flaw that if you said, I did this or we did this on a resume, it's just very, very uncommon. So I would generally avoid pronouns, and what you write a resume in, the standard perspective is called implied first person. Not third person. Third person would be Mr. Youngquist, managed a budget, but implied first person is just saying managed a budget, like you see all my samples here. Assist with PR efforts, partner. Everyone knows you're talking about yourself, so it's called implied first person. So that's the most common writing style on a resume. And then tenses, any past jobs, generally you change to past tense, and then current jobs are current tense. There's a few exceptions, like if in your current job, your responsibilities, which are ongoing, might be current tense, but then the things you got done last year, you might have past tense. So it might go back and forth, but it just depends on just the truth. Is this something you're doing now or something you did before? Okay, so just be consistent in that. I've seen people that forgot to change their last job from present tense to past tense when they get a new job. Okay, and then last but not least, if you have any acronyms that are not well understood by almost everyone, like MBA, everyone knows what an MBA is. What else is there out there? PhD, everyone knows what that is. But if you're starting to use acronyms, like if you're in the tech industry and you say SaaS, software as a service, chances are everyone in the tech industry is going to know what that is. But if you're at Microsoft and you say you're in the SS&G group, no one's going to know what that is unless they work at Microsoft. So just check all your acronyms and make sure, oh, do I need to spell these out at least once so people understand what they are? I see that mistake sometimes. There's just a ton of this jargon and stuff that, people haven't explained. Okay, so long story short, again, it just seems like such a simple thing, but it's so preventable. I would assume your resume might have a few of these issues on it. Get a few people to proof it, and just see if you catch anything, because it would be such a shame to miss an opportunity over something this preventable. Doesn't mean every document you ever write has to be perfect, but resumes, it's assumed this is the highest quality of work you could produce, which is why you want to be so dogmatic about making sure it's perfect, okay? Moving on from there, getting a little more sophisticated. The third out of 5 cardinal rules on a resume is you've got to have a crystal clear focus. What are you? What do you do? What kind of job are you looking for? Because resumes are advertisements, and the way the world is going, companies, all of us, most of us as consumers, we want the specialized solution to our problem, right? So if you just write a resume that doesn't indicate what you want and just says stuff like, I'm an effective leader who's good with people and gets things done, I'm still left wondering, are you a financial person, a salesperson, an operations director? What are you? So the way people handle that in this day and age, they don't use objective statements generally. Those have pretty much gone by the wayside and are considered pretty outdated in most HR circles. And part of the reason for that is for years and years and years, people would write objectives that were just full of cliches. Seeking a challenging job that will use my skills in a growing company in the Seattle area. And people kind of roll their eyes and go, as opposed to what? A job that doesn't use your skills in a company that's dead end and going nowhere? So it just, all these years of bad objectives, wishy-washy objectives, means that that word kind of triggers the gag reflex in a lot of HR people. So I wouldn't use an objective anymore. What most people do is they put a headline at the top and or a tagline with it. So right at the top of their resume, it just indicates, here's the type of job in general I'm targeting, both by level and sort of title. And then optional, if there's a really specific industry you're going into, I do sales of real estate, then you might indicate real estate industry or real estate sector or something like that. So what you see examples I have there on the page, that when you access this recorded version of the slides, you'll see those examples. But if I just jump over to some of my own samples here, just to illustrate things, you know, right at the top of most of my resumes, it says, what are you? Oh, you're a user experience and insights analyst. I get it. Now I know what box you would fit in my organization. Okay, this one here. Oh, you're a general manager with a focus on transportation services. So this is the approach I think works best. And as many of you are probably wondering, yes, you change it. So if you have 3 slightly different types of jobs you're going after, accountant, financial analyst, and bookkeeper, I would just have 3 versions with those slightly different headlines on the top, right? And just try to have a specialized version of your resume for each of those 3 different targets. Again, some people put actual taglines in. Let me show you one of those here, if I can find one. Where do I have one of those? Here's a kind of an example. You know, where at the top it says this person is a financial planning and analysis director, but under it, it calls out a few specific areas they're strong in. So that's one way of having just a little subheader or tagline. Okay. And then something that goes along with that you probably saw in a lot of my examples is summary statements. Now, I'll be the first to admit, a lot of readers probably skip right over a paragraph at the top of that summarizes you, and they go right down, like that one graphic I showed you. They go right down and look at your titles and your industries. But I still write summaries on most of my resumes, you know, anywhere from 1 to 5 sentences. And even if they don't read it, what I'm trying to do in there is just give a little taste. You know, here's what I do, here's the problems I solve, here's the key things I want you to know about me and my work style. Some people get really creative with that and use really bold word choices. Others keep it pretty safe. The one thing I would try to avoid, though, is cliches. So many of these summaries say things like team-oriented, results-oriented, dynamic, professional. And I just go, what does that even mean? What is a dynamic professional? Someone who's really high one day and low the next, or self-motivated professional? What is that? Does that mean you're in it for yourself? So I see a lot of this stuff people think they should put on a resume. It just feels right, but it's hollow, overused language. So if you're going to write a summary, try to use word choices that are a little more unique, a little more authentic. And that's kind of what I shoot for. Again, if you don't have one, that's fine. But generally, I try to put 1 to 5 sentences that kind of sum people up, just in case someone reads it and thinks it's useful. Okay, what else do we have in here? Some questions. So a couple of you said, well, what if I'm not already in that job? If I'm not a user experience analyst or a researcher? I personally think if you've gone to school and you are looking for that kind of job and you think you're at least somewhat qualified, it's okay to call yourself that. You're not saying that headline is a job title you've held before. You're basically saying that is the goal, that is the objective. So I would probably put if I was trying to become a UX researcher, I would put UX researcher. But I might, if I'm really new, I might say something like UX research assistant or junior UX designer or something to kind of indicate, or entry-level UX professional, to just kind of indicate I'm pretty new. I have also seen other people who are changing careers that will say goal, user experience researcher. So it's not quite the same as saying objective, but it's the same idea. It's saying, I haven't done this work, but my goal is urban planner or something. And that's if you're really making a major change and you need to, even in the summary, if I was a major career changer, I would say something. Let me think if I have an example here. Because if you're changing careers in a big way, you've got to be a little more upfront about that. I think this one's kind of like this here. So here is someone who used to be a journalist. They were a reporter and a news editor, and they're trying to totally shift gears and get into architecture and urban planning. So you see in the summary, we kind of told that story. Expert communicator making proactive career shift into the urban planning field, drawing upon these transferable skills like X, Y, and Z. So if you're changing careers, I would write the summary and be more upfront of your goals and what you're trying to do. If you're making a slight shift, accountant to finance, you probably don't need to do that, okay? What else do we got? People ask, will scanners pick up current tense versus past tense? Actually, I'm pretty sure they recognize both and they don't discriminate. Where that would be an issue is if they find a word that's under a previous date, like they say, oh, when you use the word influenced, it was back in 2007 under that job. So they might penalize you or not weight that as much for an old date. But I don't think tense matters is my point. I don't think they're that sophisticated. We're going to talk, let's see. We're going to talk later about returning to the workforce. The headline or tagline, yes, I mean the current job title or category you're looking for. Not the exact one. It's not like if you apply to Amazon and they've got a job that says Kindle Device Manager 3-India, that's what you put. You put what is the general mainstream name of that kind of job. So it might be Product Manager Devices and Mobile Accessories or something. Or if there's an accountant 2 job, you don't say accountant 2, you just say accountant or senior accountant. So you're putting the category of the job, kind of the yellow page heading, not the exact title that company has. That would seem a little too contrived if you were matching their job exactly to the letter, I think. Okay. Lots of good questions coming in. As I mentioned earlier, yes, the slides and a recording will be available for this presentation on the same UW page that you RSVP'd for. If human resources doesn't know an acronym, again, tough call on that. When in doubt, I would spell out an acronym, right? If you're absolutely sure everyone's going to know it, even HR, then I wouldn't. But yeah, when in doubt, spell it out at least once. Okay, and lots of other good questions. Most of these I'm going to talk about later, so I'm going to move on here. Okay, so hold those thoughts on some of those. I will address them later. Okay, number 4, really important tip. I'm sure most of you have heard this or are wondering about this. Keyword matching is critical. So because there are now the scanning systems where you send your resume and often before a human sees it, it's getting sliced and diced and ranked by some computer program, right or wrong. That's how it works at a lot of companies. One of the most important things is you don't want to miss relevant keywords, right? Now, one of those common things I see in the resumes people bring to me is they're missing keywords, very obvious keywords in their own field. So I will have a sales manager and I'll say, have you ever done contract negotiation or sales training or deal closing or upselling? And they'll say, yeah, I've done all those things for 20 years. And I'll say, but none of those words are on your resume. Why not? And what they usually say is either, oh, I forgot, or more commonly, I really have to put that? I thought that was obvious, or I thought that was assumed. Well, sadly, buzzwords are not assumed. These computers are still pretty dumb. So any jargon, any terms that relate to your job, you got to get them in there. The other reason sometimes some people miss them is that they've been working at a company for a long time or out of the workforce. They may not have paid attention to the new language being used. So they may, at Microsoft, maybe they still call, whatever, I'm just making it up. Maybe they still, I had someone from Microsoft once come to me who did merger and acquisition planning. And I said to her, oh, you're a corporate development professional. And she looked at me and she says, no, I'm not. I don't do any sales. And I said, no, I didn't say business development. I said corporate development, which is the generally accepted term for people who do merger and acquisition work. But she said at Microsoft, we don't call it that. We don't use those words. So here she was writing a resume trying to get those kind of jobs outside of Microsoft, but she wasn't using the single most common keyword in her field. Now that's an extreme example, but my point is, as I'm going to show you here, you're going to want to brush up and make sure and do some study in the places I'm going to show you. Do I have all the right keywords? Okay. So here's how you do it. The first thing I would say is what I generally like to do. Not everyone agrees, but on almost every resume I write, I include a section near the top that says something like key skills and qualification or areas of expertise, or if you're newer to the job force, say key strengths and abilities. But what I'm trying to do is make a very scannable, readable section of like 12 or 15 of the most important keywords I want that reader to see, and I want their computer systems to see. So whether it's 2 columns or 3 columns or bullets, or you could format it. Sometimes if I'm tight on space, I just put it all in like one block separated by little slashes. But I usually put a section like that to make it easy for people to find the keywords and to make it easy for me, the job candidate, to go in and quickly change them. Oh, this job wants somebody with executive coaching. I'm going to kick something out and put those words in. So customizing that list a little bit to each job, I think, is a really smart practice. And it makes it easier if you have a little matrix or a section that's just really about keyword matching. Okay, as I already mentioned, you don't want to overlook obvious terms, but I will say you don't need to say things generally unless you're a totally new starting out employee or in the workforce. You know, those of us with at least a few years of experience don't have to say things like interpersonal skills or excellent oral communication skills, or even things sometimes like teamwork, because there's generally going to be more specialized skills you've built since a high school kid or a new graduate. So I'll see a lot of even managers, directors that say things like that. And I say, I'm sure we can come up with much more specialized words in your field than something like interpersonal skills, which I think would be assumed because you've been working successfully for 20 years. So it doesn't have to be that basic unless, again, you're totally new and you just don't have any more specialized work experience. Okay, as I already said, there's a lot of these common cliches to avoid. A couple of you asked about what are the cliches to avoid. Just Google resume cliches. There's whole websites devoted to lists of words that are overused. I have a few on the slides here, but there's even more. If you just Google that question, you'll see a lot of sites about that. Another interesting point on keywords is I think it does contribute in some way to age discrimination. And what I mean by that is kind of what I was saying earlier. Some people who've been working for a long time and older workers, you know, they've been at a company a longer time, and they often, not always, but often have not gotten a lot of recent training, right? They got their degree and certification years and years ago, and they really haven't needed to update it. And so what happens, again, they're less likely to know of the latest, greatest terminology. Oh, it used to be called integrated marketing, and now everyone's calling it omni-channel marketing. Or it used to be called recruiting, and now everyone's calling it talent acquisition. So if you're someone who hasn't been doing studying or schooling or out in the job market lately, again, make a note. You want to be using the latest language, the freshest language. Okay, I'm going to show you how to find that on the next slide. And I actually kind of doubled up on that one. Sorry. Avoid those acronyms again. I'll hit that point yet again. Okay. So how do we find those keywords? How do you make sure, now that I've made you all paranoid about keywords, that you have all the right terms on your resume, or at least most of them? First thing, it's so obvious, but study job advertisements. Right or wrong, companies are the ones who decide what keywords they want. So just take 5, 10, 15 advertisements that relate to the kind of job you want and put them in front of you and study them. Oh, 7 out of 10 of these jobs ask for executive calendar management and travel itineraries, or 8 out of 10 say we want digital advertising, net promoter scores, and software as a service. So your audience, your ads are going to tell you what keywords they want. So that's a really, even if you're not, you know, looking just in Seattle, if you were just doing research, you could find 10 jobs around the whole country and just pick them apart. What are the keywords? Another way you can do it is you can go to Indeed, and Indeed has kind of a hidden section most people aren't aware of that just has millions of resumes that people have uploaded. So if you go to indeed.com/resumes, okay, so let me go to that. It's free. And I just search it and I say, oh, I'll just pick one. I'm a marketing manager, and I look for other people who are marketing managers. Okay. Here's 227,000 marketing manager resumes. So I'd probably just start scanning them, opening them up, and looking for words that I forgot to put, right? So you can look at some, oh, I forgot to say social media, or something like that. Actually, now that I'm clicking on them, free, oh, okay, I have to take that back. This used to be free. It looks like they're now selling that, unfortunately. So this could give you a really high-level summary. At any rate, since that little trick doesn't seem to work anymore, it costs money, do the next best thing, which is go to LinkedIn and do the same thing. Look up marketing managers and just look at their profiles and look for the language they use. You know, you're not going to be the first person who needed to do that, so you can beg, borrow, and steal from a lot of other people in your field. There's only a finite number of these words. Okay, I would highly recommend, if you're not already, you read industry literature, blogs, trade journals, I mean, whatever. Any of us should be doing that anyway to stay current in our field. I mean, I do that in the career sector. I read a number of publications because I don't want to fall behind. And sometimes I will see terms I'm not familiar with. I once read something that said, blah, 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 natural resume. And I said, what's a natural resume? I've never heard of that. And I did a little more Googling, and it turns out it was this short-lived fad where people would blend their personal life with their professional work on a resume. So it would say, I build spreadsheets and I also love my dog, Fred, you know, kind of thing. And wasn't my cup of tea, but it was someone invented this natural resume. And I went and looked at what that was because I didn't ever want a client to ask me, what is that? And I wouldn't know the answer. So again, you know, make sure to pay attention to industry literature, things like that. And then last but not least, and a couple of you wrote in about this, which is good. There are some tools out there online that are, some are free, some cost a little money, that are designed to help you get the right keywords on your resume and evaluate overall how well your resume is matched up to a given job. So we don't have, I wish I had time to demonstrate all of these in detail, but I would say I have no affiliations with these companies. The top 3 ones, though, I think do the best job of this are a local company called jobscan.co, another one called see, even typos on my slides. I'm 90% sure that should be resonate with a U. I will change it before I send UW the slides. I was thinking, I think there's a brewery on Capitol Hill I was confusing it with. Resonate with a U, sorry. And then Carmen.co is the newest one I've found, where you can check your resume and how well it stacks up against an ad, and it'll tell you, here's the words you're missing from that ad. You got these ones, but you missed these other keywords. So you might check those out, see if they're useful. I think all of these 3 have a free option to start. So you can just test drive them, see what you think. If you think they're so wonderful you can't live without them, pay them their $20 or $30 if you can afford it, and then you can use them constantly. The only thing I would caution you with, though, is remember what I said at the beginning of the talk, resumes are not the end all and be all in job hunting. If I had someone sitting there for 5 hours a day using these tools to perfect every resume, I'm going to say, are you avoiding the things you don't want to do, like networking, building relationships, following up? So some people hide behind this kind of technology and don't realize, even if you do all the stuff these sites make, it doesn't make a massive difference usually. It makes some difference, but it's not like you're going to suddenly triple your results, I don't think. But anyway, these tools are helpful. If you're not familiar with them, check them out, see if you find them useful. But the core thing that they do, among others, is they will take a job ad language and your resume, and they'll tell you which words you missed. They'll say, you got these ones, but here's 13 other keywords you forgot to put on your resume. So that's pretty helpful. It's not that you couldn't do it by eye, but it's slick and automated, and it's out there, okay? Last but not least, as far as my top 5 rules, the 5th and final thing almost everyone agrees with is impress me. Do you have measurable, specific accomplishments? So if your resume just says, here's my boring job responsibilities. I was an intern. I assisted with marketing. I answered phone calls. I made copies. No one's going to be impressed by that because everyone you're competing with has pretty much done all those same things, right? That's what a marketing intern does. So I know it's hard. I know for some of you, you won't be able to do as much of this as others. You got to rack your brain. But what we want to do is have at least some bullets that explain specific contributions you made to that company. Now, if you're starting out entry level or low level, the expectation of that is going to be much lower than if you're a manager, a director, an executive, where they fully expect you to be able to impress them with how did you move the needle, what did you get done. So the end game is to show you did a good or a great job, not just show them you did a job. Everyone who submitted a resume did a job, and they don't want to hire mediocre. So you want to include numbers when you can, dollars, percentages, quotas, time saving. Invented my receptionist could say, negotiated with office supplies vendors and saved over $15,000 a year, or answered, they could say redesigned the customer greeting process and saved 5% over the previous time, or whatever it is. So most of you are going to have those if you think hard about it. It just takes a little digging. If you don't have actual numbers, other details can help too. Timelines. got the project done 2 weeks ahead of schedule, or used a certain piece of software, used Oracle to build a new database that did this, or supported over 200 customers in 5 different countries or something. So you have to really see if you can give some meat to your resume. And if you can't, you can't, but try your best. It's rare. Some people, in lieu of those kind of numbers and details, will put like testimonials. They might have a letter of recommendation or a LinkedIn recommendation. They might put some quotes. I mean, this is really rare, but they put some quotes of what people have said about them. And again, my whole point is when it gets down to other people qualified similar to you, most of you have done the exact same day-to-day job responsibilities. So what's going to separate you is, were you good at it and what results did you achieve? So just check your resume and make sure you don't have weak bullets that say things like increased efficiency, because see, the reader is going to go, did you save 10 cents or did you save $1 million? If you say led a team, I'm going to say, was it 1 part-time intern or 10 cross-functional people in 3 locations? So believe it or not, if you try, there's going to be more meat there than you probably think there is, even for, you know, I have assistants and interns, and we can usually come up with some kind of details, some kind of numbers. So I know it's probably the hardest of the 5, but it is an important rule most companies want to see. Okay? Okay, so I'm watching our time. We're about an hour in. I've got about 10 or 15 minutes more stuff I want to show you, but the good news is all this next stuff is the stuff that really relates to a lot of the questions you were asking in the Q&A box. And so let me get through this, and then for the last 15 minutes, whoever sticks around, I will try to go back through this list and answer any final ones that I somehow didn't touch on. But a couple of the things a lot of you have been asking are going to be on this next slide. So this completes what I consider the 5 cardinal rules of a good resume. If you pass these 5 tests, you're already in like the top 10%. Okay, everything beyond those 5, like I said, is a judgment call. The experts fight about it. If you ask 5 different people, you're going to hear 5 different things. What if you have gaps in your work history? What if you took 3 years off to raise kids or longer? What if you got laid off and couldn't find a job for a year or something? Different. Some people say don't mention them, don't draw attention to them. Others say you absolutely should mention in what you did. My belief, for whatever that's worth, is I generally tell people if it's longer than a year, explain it in the most positive way you can. Took sabbatical to raise, took sabbatical from professional career to raise a young family, stayed current on training and did a lot of volunteer work or something. Or if you were just truly unemployed, you might say, took a break, you know, just say took a sabbatical, or say, if you did any schooling, say attended school and brushed up my skill sets, or started a business, or did consulting if you did even a tiny bit of consulting. So I believe over 6 months, that's when companies start going, what's going on there? Were you in prison? What happened? Health issue? If it's less than 6 months, honestly, I think that's so common today that people take breaks or just can't find their next thing. I probably wouldn't devote space to talking about it. Okay. So that's just my opinion if I had to kind of break the tie, but you will hear both things on that. I think the trend is to explaining them more than it used to be. Most recruiters now tell me, I would love to kind of know. Oh, and one other thing, if the gap was a long, long time ago, 20 years ago, no one's going to probably care. So we're talking about gaps probably in the last 10, 15 years, 6 months or more, the ones I would devote a line or two to explaining on the resume. Okay, do you need to mention why you left the job? I was fired, I was laid off, I quit. No, I've seen that once in a blue moon. I just don't think there's any benefit or very little benefit to explaining why you left the company. The only thing that comes even close to that would be if you had your own business and left it to go back to the workforce, I might say something like, you know, sold, if it's true, you know, sold the business to another owner, or sold, or led a profitable exit strategy or something like that, or got merged by a competitor. But generally, most reasons people leave jobs, it's not expected you mention them, okay? Another very common question, especially those worried about age bias, should I only list like the last 10 years of my career, or go all the way back if you're older to 20 years, 30 years, or beyond? 2 schools of thought. I would say a third of people say you're not going to fool anyone anyway. These companies can check your employment dates, make you fill out applications. So if you try to hide your age or trim that, you're just setting yourself up later when they're going to read your stuff and go, wait a minute, you sort of lied to me. You left a whole bunch of stuff off your resume. The other 2/3 of people, I would say, do say to probably trim out some early stuff pre-2000 if you're old enough to have that, unless it's extremely relevant to what you're trying to do now. And especially if you made a career change, like if for 10 years you worked in a video store, if I guess those, and then got a professional job at Microsoft, there's no point necessarily to put 10 years of video retail experience, right? So just kind of use common sense. But I will say most people generally, if they're older, probably go back 10, 15, 20 years, or as far as it's kind of relevant. And those early jobs they either leave out, or what they put in some of mine, I'll just put like one line at the bottom that says early career experience available on request, or early career experience in retail, retail with Nordstrom, details on request. So I'll allude to it a tiny bit, but I won't put any dates and I won't go into any details. Again, though, there's not a right answer. It really depends on your strategy and what your exact careers were for how long. But the trend is to trimming out a little bit of the early stuff. Should you mention hobbies and outside interests? That one cracks me up. I've had people that say anyone who would put that on a resume, I wouldn't hire because they're not work focused enough. And who cares if they're a scuba diver or a golfer or they can fruit at home? I've had another half of people who have literally gotten jobs because of a small talk thing. I literally, right before this call, had a new client, and I don't think this will disclose anything, but he said, I said, do you have any hobbies, anything outside of work that you're really into? He says, well, I'm a world champion weightlifter or something. And he mentioned a gym, and I said, oh, I've got a friend who goes to that gym. Do you know him? Oh my God. And they were like old friends. So sometimes those hobbies create these connections and rapport that can lead, whether they admit it or not, to them thinking more favorably of you. I wouldn't put anything controversial. I wouldn't say, I'd be really careful with things like religion or politics, just because obviously you could really turn off a lot of people on the other side. But I will, in a lot of resumes, unless the client just hates the idea, I'll put like a final line at the bottom that says something like, I don't know if any of these have it, outside interests include home brewing, something, and something, as just a little teaser. Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not finding it, but I would put it down at the bottom and I would just say outside interests, scuba diving, French literature, and something. And I've had people literally say that was the first question the interview asked me, and we hit it off on a good note. But there's other people who think you shouldn't put them. Some of it depends on industry. If you're a lawyer applying to law firms, I think we'd all agree it's less likely they're going to care about your hobbies. If you're applying to a tech startup, they're probably more into that kind of thing. So again, kind of use common sense. Volunteer work doesn't have to be there unless it's highly relevant, if you are leadership in a nonprofit or something. So I would include it if I had room just for small talk. But if you're fighting for space, that's something you could sacrifice. And of course, I'm talking about kind of for-profit jobs. If you're in the nonprofit industry or targeting that industry, then it makes more sense to include community service and stuff like that. Okay, let me catch up on a few questions. Someone said if you, let's see here, where do you explain the gap in your resume? You explain it wherever the date would be. So between the jobs, wherever the gap is, just put one little line and say like sabbatical or consultant, or just put it in the chronological order that it was in your career. So it just really is based on date. If you're at a job for a very short time, a few weeks, a few months, it's up to you. If it was something that you didn't accomplish anything, it didn't end well, I'd probably avoid it unless it was going to create a big gap, then I might throw it in there. That's a tough one. I had someone today who was only at a job 6 weeks and it didn't work out. And I said, I wouldn't put it. It'll just raise too many questions and all that. So generally you don't put things less than about 6 months. If it was something you can say was a contract job or a consulting job, then I would put it. But if it was a true W-2 paycheck job and it just didn't work out, just debate, what are the pros and cons of that? That's a tough one.
Matt, if you're looking at questions, would you start from the top because they have some of the more popular questions?
Okay. Should your resume match your LinkedIn page? Sort of, but sadly, you might have to go back to my first webinar 2 weeks ago, because what that explained in detail is the differences between a resume and LinkedIn. Most of it's the same, the education, the work experience, but there's a number of important differences in keyword placement. So I hate to punt on that one, but we did a whole hour on that 2 weeks ago, if you can access that recording and those slides on that. I think I talked about career changes. If you change careers significantly, if you're trying to, I would talk about that at the top in the summary. And of course, in your work experience, you want to try to emphasize whatever skills relate most to the new industry, even if you're really stretching them. You know, you get what I'm saying, but like if 10 years ago I was a marketing person, but as part of my job, I did some financial analysis of my marketing campaigns, and now I want to go work in finance. Well, of course, I'm going to play up the financial part of marketing more than it probably deserves just to showcase those transferable skills. So again, I think that's kind of commonsensical, if that's a word. Transferable skills, it's the same thing I just said. You're generally putting them under the jobs you did them. You're highlighting them. Plus, in that keywords matrix I talked about, I would put most of your transferable skills in there. So if you're a good communicator, if you are good at managing budgets or whatever those skills are you're trying to sell for your new job, just get them up at the top where they can't miss them in that section. Education usually goes at the bottom on resumes, or at least where I put it. If education is your strongest credential, if you're a new graduate, if you've just invested in retraining, I might put it right at the top under the summary so that they don't miss it. But that's only if it's like your #1 credential. Otherwise, I would generally put it at the end of the resume. And my assumption is it'll draw them through the resume because they're all going to want to see it. So I usually put it at the bottom unless it's the #1 thing we want to focus on. I think I addressed the next one, which is you can call yourself anything you want in the resume headline as long as you can defend it and it's not crazy. So if you're applying to a user experience analyst, if you've never done that, but you just studied to do that and you know a lot about it, I would put it because that's my goal. So just, yeah, if I said use UX manager, well, that would be silly because I'm not even close to doing that job yet. But I think you can put the one you're targeting if it's realistic and you have some relevant qualifications. If you're a freelancer, or a consultant, I generally would put the details of the companies that you consulted or freelanced with if you're allowed to. If you're under a non-disclosure or something, don't get yourself in trouble. But see, the point is a lot of people that are unemployed will say they're a consultant, but they actually haven't done anything. And recruiters know that trick. So I always tell people, if you're allowed to say, you know, put a bullet under your freelancing, worked with Smartsheet, Avalar, and Microsoft on a series of short marketing projects, those names are going to add a lot of credibility. Or if you can't name actual names, describe worked with a $5 million medical startup and a larger business to consumer company on a series of projects. So long story short, I would try to put those details unless you're just legally not allowed to or it's too dangerous. Same thing for results at companies. If we want to stress your accomplishments, you can't say anything obviously that's, you know, under a non-disclosure or something that you'd get fired or someone would sue you. So you got to, you know, use common sense about what are you probably allowed to say and what's too confidential. Okay, someone asked, these are really good questions. School projects in your education section on the resume, most people I think undersell that. So if I have a degree or a certification, especially if you're a career changer, what I would do is put the degree or the certification, and under it I would say key coursework included or coursework emphasis : and I would list like 8 to 10 of the classes or topics I studied because that's all those juicy keywords we're trying to get into there. So if I'm a user experience person, we keep going back to that, and I just got a certificate in UX from UW, I'd say coursework included storyboarding, wireframing, front-end design, or whatever those classes are I took, because that gets all those keywords on there in a legitimate way. You took the classes, you study them, even if you haven't done them for money. School projects, if you did projects that were significant, put completed team project to do a business case for Microsoft, or, you know, designed a robot that could pick tomatoes. I don't, you know, whatever you did. So try to milk more out of your education. If you've got scholarships, if you've got a high GPA, you know, usually by a certain age, those drop off. But if you're newer to the workforce, if you're in clubs, if you're in activities, so think about, yeah, can you get a lot more of that rich, robust stuff under education, especially the class names? I think that can be really useful. Next question, keywords from job descriptions. If they're cliched, again, if they sound cliched to you, if you're reading a job description that says they want smart, motivated go-getters to go do this job, I'm just calling BS on that and going, they don't even care about that. That's just a bunch of hollow language they threw in there. if they said a really unusual word choice, like we want proactive thinkers who anticipate obstacles and work around them, then I might say, well, they put some more thought into that. I might sneak the words proactive or anticipate obstacles in my summary or in one of my job descriptions or somewhere. So again, I'm trying to separate just the junky, vanilla, cliched stuff that a lot of these ads are full of. It's like when people say they want excellent verbal and oral communication skills, I pull my hair out and go, if you had them, you wouldn't say it like that, because nobody says, I have oral communication skills, right? What you'd instead say is am highly proficient in web content design, copywriting, speech writing, and ghostwriting. You would actually call out the types of communications you've done. So you're just looking for those common cliches and trying to avoid them, even if companies use them. Someone asked about references. That's on my next slide. No, references don't need to be mentioned on resumes anymore. That disappeared around the turn of the millennium. They'll ask you for references later in the interview sometimes, and then you have to provide some. But on the resume, you don't even have to say references on request. It's assumed if you want the job, you will provide references. So that's totally gone from resumes, with the one tiny exception, like 1 in 1,000. If that's all you have to say in your work history, if you've got like nothing else to put, you could list a few references. Or in some jobs that are very like political appointments or things, if you can drop some big names, it might help. But again, that's a very rare situation. For most of us, you just don't mention references anymore. If you have your work status, if you have a visa or a green card or US citizen, that's a tough one. I usually put that at the very bottom under education and additional information. If you're a citizen, I don't think you need to say anything. If you have work authority, green card or whatnot, I would probably mention that at the bottom, like fully authorized to work in the US, green card or whatever visa holder. If you need visa sponsorship, we talked about this in one of the past webinars. I just to avoid surprising a company, I'd probably put something at the bottom, H1, whatever it is, H1 visa holder would need corporate sponsorship or something like that. So I generally would include that if it's something that could cause an issue. If you're a citizen, or a permanent resident, then I wouldn't mention it because that's going to be the assumed position. Okay. Next question. I think we kind of talked about one-page resume for human readable or ATS scanner. To me, it's the same thing because scanners are mostly looking for keywords. Humans are looking for keywords. So these recruiters are also looking for those same words. So I'm not a believer that you need 2 different resumes, one for robots and one for people. Like I said, you might strip the formatting out so the text scans a little easier. But I know resume writers that I'm not convinced it's, again, not kind of a scam to write a resume for humans and then tell a job hunter, pay me another $100 and I'll do one for the robots. In my experience, they're not processed in all that different a way. If you've got the right keywords, if you got your facts on there, that's a good resume regardless. To the person who asked lower, the old trick back in, we're going back to the 80s and 90s, of putting white text behind with keywords. So some people used to say, how do I sneak 100 keywords in my resume? I'll put it in white font that they can't see, but the scanners will still pick it up. Okay, not only does every recruiter know that trick and will instantly, when they go, why did this person come up for this word? I don't see it. They're going to go, oh, because this person is so lacking confidence, they tried to trick me into interviewing them, which doesn't go over well. Plus, when they get scanned into systems, all the text is turned to black. So all those hidden keywords are going to show up in a big jumbled mess on the version they see, which I don't recommend. So that used to be a trick, years ago. I don't think it works now. I'm not a fan of it. Maybe someone else tries it, but to answer that question, I don't recommend that. If you have written anything published, I would put that in that bottom bucket, additional information. Author of the book, blah, 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 by so-and-so publishing. If it's not relevant to your career, I would debate, is it going to add much or do you have space for it? But if it's relevant, if you wrote a book on your profession, then absolutely I would put that in. Or if you author a blog, if you've given speeches at events, any of that I would just put down under additional information. Something like publishing or public speaking includes this book, this article, whatever. So that to me just kind of goes down at the bottom. If you have a ton of that, I would create its own section called like presentations and public speaking and just list it all in there. If you just got a couple things, lump them under the additional information header. Okay, next one. I think I already talked at length about how to make a career transition and what you have to do there. So I think I've covered that. If roles don't have metrics, like I said earlier, you got to just brainstorm. Are there percentages? Are there time saving? Are there at least details, names of departments, names of customers, names of software? If you don't have them, you don't have them, and there's nothing you can do. But I think some people just haven't, they think it's all got to be dollars and cents when it can be these other things too. Save 20% of time or worked with a 5-person team. I mean, even those little details add a little credibility. So some people are going to have a tough time on that, but I think if you rack your brain, sometimes you can pull up that one slide's got all those different types of metrics on it. Breaking into a new industry, again, it's very similar to a career change. You just highlight the relevant keywords, highlight any experience you have with that industry. But the number one thing I'm going to tell you, you're not going to want to hear it, is you're probably not going to get a job in a new industry with a straight resume submission because you're going to be up against too many people who are in that industry. So you're going to have to use networking to make a major change. You're going to have to get somebody who knows somebody at that company to vouch for you, talk you up, and hopefully even tell you jobs before they get advertised so you're not up against 50 other people. But yeah, in today's market, the resume game of throwing resumes around the internet is a tough one to win unless you're a pretty good fit for a job. If not, you have to use networking grease to get in there. It's just the way it works. Happens all the time. Many people get hired for things they haven't worked in, but if you ask them, they're going to say, oh, I talked to an old colleague who knew someone there. They're not going to say, I sent my resume in and it came up first out of a stack of 100, because there will be other people more qualified on paper. If you've been giving a really weird or unusual title by a company, you know, we're not going to call you an accountant, we're going to call you a fiscal ninja 3, then yes, I do agree in some cases you're going to want to either change that title to the mainstream equivalent, accountant or whatever, or put the title you have, fiscal ninja 3, and then in parentheses say like accountant or accounting equivalent. Because if you don't translate that weird title, readers aren't going to know what you really are, and scanners aren't going to pick up the word that you want them to pick up. So if it's a pretty unusual title, yeah, I would try to, same thing on LinkedIn, I would either replace it entirely if you can defend it, or just add in parentheses the more common name for it. That happens quite often actually, where I'll do that on resumes. If you have a contract job, yes, I would call it out. Just put after the job parentheses contract or consulting or something like that. If, let's say, you contracted at Amazon, you would normally say Amazon parentheses contract through Volt or whatever the contracting company is. Now, sometimes the big companies don't like that. They don't want you to say you worked at Amazon. They want you to say I am a Volt employee. In most cases, though, I would still emphasize the client you supported, because that's usually going to carry more weight than the name of consulting company. So the most common way is you put Microsoft contract via whoever, Terra Staffing or something like that. Wow. Okay. Lots more. Where are we at here? 26 more to go. I don't think we're going to make it, my friends, but I will try my best. If you haven't started your education yet, or you're unfinished, I would still probably put it. I would just indicate something like, you know, project management certification program, parentheses, anticipated graduation September 2020. Or if I'm not even started, I would say something like UW leadership program member or student, and then I would put starting fall 2020 or something like that. So if I'm taking education or soon to be taking it, you don't want to bluff. I think it's okay to put it, just indicate clearly the date range so they don't think you're making it up. If you've been laid off recently, do you change the job from present to the actual date you get laid off? I tend to think you need to change it. I don't think you should keep it to present, because I think that's a big misleading thing. I know some recruiters and resume writers think you should always act like you're working even if you've left a job. You might be able to get away with that for a few weeks and be able to defend it. Oh, geez, I forgot to change it, or I'm still doing a little bit of consulting. But if I was hiring someone and their resume said they worked somewhere and I found out they didn't, I'm sorry, that would probably be an instant dismissal, because I think, what else are they lying to me or not fully telling me the truth? So I disagree with a few people on that one. I don't think you should, if you leave a job, say you left close the date out. If you work for many years at the same place, usually you can just put one header for the company, whatever, Microsoft or Boeing, and then not repeat the company name 100 times. You just repeat the job titles. And like you said, have a timeline. I sometimes will put them all. I wish we had time. I could show you examples, but like if someone had only worked at Boeing for 30 years, I would probably say roles held include and just list all the roles at the top to save room. And then just have a summary of the key responsibilities and highlights. I wouldn't try to list every last job separately because that would just eat up a ton of space. So if you're one of those people, just have one header for that company and break out the jobs individually, or even combine some together if they're pretty similar jobs. If you do certificates, whether through UW or other places, yeah, I would put them under education. I usually just say education and training or education and professional development. And I put all that stuff together, education, certifications, licenses. I suppose if you had so much of that stuff in space, you could break out formal education or degrees versus certifications. I generally just lump it together. I figure it all fits under an education section. A work study job, 6 months or less. Yes, I would include it, especially if you don't have other legitimate jobs that you could fill that time with. But yeah, a 6-month work study job, everyone knows that that's not a long-term job by nature, so I'd probably put it. I don't understand the next question, so we're going to skip that one. That's a great question. If you're on standby or furloughed right now due to COVID, I would actually mention that. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think that is such a unique situation that we all understand that it's not the same as being laid off or terminated necessarily for cause. So if I was at Nordstrom, let's say, and they furloughed a bunch of us, which technically means they will bring you back if the economy improves, I would say Nordstrom, blah, blah, blah to present, and I might put in parentheses currently on furlough or something. And I think most employers will have a soft spot for that. And it is a notch better than implying you've left there. Yeah, that is one exception to my rule of, not saying present, because furlough is kind of a unique situation that we're all living with now. What else do we have? Listing the details of your leadership skills rather than duties. I think on that one, it just depends what you're trying to emphasize. If you're changing careers and leadership skills are hands down the most transferable thing, not the stuff you do day-to-day in the job, then yes, I would try to emphasize the skills more relevant, leadership and communications and that. If I was going to get a job and leave career coaching and go do something else, very little of what I do every day, resume writing, that's not going to matter to my next company. So I would try to translate that into what do I do that is relatable? Is it employment law? Is it content development? Is it leadership? Things like that. And again, I hate to keep saying this, you just sort of use common sense. What would be most relevant to the readers of this resume I'm trying to target? And you proceed accordingly. Cover letters are not indispensable. Cover letters are almost dead. Most recruiters tell me they don't read them. So I generally tell people if the company asks for a cover letter, write one. If they don't ask and you have a few minutes to kill, submit one just in the off chance they read it. And some companies don't want one at all. But the thing with cover letters is you don't want to spend hours on them unless it's a rare situation where they're asking you to answer like 10 essay questions or something. Because again, something like 70% of companies don't read cover letters anymore. They say they don't have time. So you want to come up, there's a million templates on the web, but just a simple, short, 2/3 page letter that what I usually do is just put like a standard letter explaining who I am and blah, 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 thanks for your time. And in the middle, I say, here's a couple key qualifications that I think really relate to this opening. And I'll put like 5 to 7 bullets of what matches that job best. And that's the piece I really customize on a cover letter. The rest is kind of template. And I just don't want to spend more than 5 or 10 minutes on a letter not knowing if 2/3 of the time they're just not even going to read it, and that time's wasted. So cover letters have really died off a bit compared to the old days. Okay, unfortunately, the salary question just doesn't relate to resumes, so I can't really address that right now. I do have some information on my website on that. Same thing with the next question. I'm sorry, if you've left a job because of corruption, you don't put that on a resume, which is our topic tonight. I'd have to talk to you offline about ways you would explain that in an interview. Next week, we're talking about interviewing, so that would be a much more relevant question I could answer then. Video resumes, I'm not a big believer in. I have seen this fad where people do these web resumes or video resumes, unless you're an interactive designer by trade or a journalist or someone. For the standard person, it's so much effort to do a good one or a lot of money. I just have never really heard companies say, oh, the reason I hired them is they had a video resume. So I'm not a fan unless that's easy for you to do, or you want to experiment with it, or you're in a field where showing off a video of yourself and your work is just relevant to the job. But that's not the case for most of us. We talked about the next one, that if you're a student and you have nothing else to put, you're putting college studies, projects, volunteer work, honestly, just whatever you've got to fill that space if it's not legitimate work experience. You just got to stretch it as much as you can. Functional resume, someone finally asked. I have that on my bottom of my slide here. Functional resumes are resumes that are built totally around your skills, not your work history. So you would have a resume that is like, I'm good at project management, marketing, budgeting, and down at the bottom or on page 2, there'd be a short little list of the actual jobs you've held. They sound great in theory. A lot of career changers say, hey, I want to write a functional resume. If you're thinking about that, Google the topic, Google functional resume, or should I use a functional resume? And what you will find is at least 90% of experts and HR people say, don't do that, because the readers instantly, when they see that, think you're hiding something. Why would you use that format and not a standard chronological resume format unless you're trying to distract me from something? So I don't use those a lot. I think a hybrid resume that has like the top with my skills list and summary, that kind of gets some of that same stuff in there, but there's still enough about your work experience that you're credible. So others may disagree on that, but if you survey and Google that, you'll find that functional resumes used to be kind of popular and then they sort of fell out of favor. So I'm not a big fan of those. Okay, believe it or not, it's 6:30, so we're technically supposed to be wrapping up. I'm just going to show you for the recording. I didn't get to all of these, but I talked about some of them. So these are all the judgment call issues on resumes that you just have to flip a coin or use your best judgment or ask 5 people and see what the majority says. But I'm here to tell you, after 25 years, none of these are ones where there's a right or wrong answer. There are people on both sides of all these questions. And then lastly, I already said most people leave out their address on resumes today. I already mentioned you don't include references on them anymore. There is a trend to shorter resumes, but that doesn't mean an experienced manager and executive shouldn't or couldn't have a 2-pager. It's just that you'll hear a lot of people saying, if you can get it to 1 page, do it, because attention spans have shrunk a lot. If you've used any kind of software, I'd encourage you to put it on the resume, because even jobs that are not tech jobs, like admin assistants, that's a make or break issue at a lot of companies, is everyone seems so similar in terms of their other job duties. Sometimes they'll just say, who's used Microsoft Project, who's used Basecamp, who's used SharePoint. So even a line that just lists some of those, even Microsoft Office, I would put on there just in case they're filtering by tech words. So a lot of people fail to put that stuff in there. And then last but not least, very rare, if you have a portfolio site or a blog or a podcast or any other thing like that that's relevant to your career, then I would include links at the top to that. Or even links to your employers if your employers have websites, just as kind of a newfangled thing, but it's still pretty uncommon. I was just trying to think of things I see today that didn't used to happen. Okay, so we're at time. Jamie or PU, my nature is to always try to answer every question, so I'd be happy to stick around, but you tell me, do we want to stop the recording and most people can sign off and I'll just stick around and answer these remaining ones? Or
I think we can give you 5 minutes more. Jamie, is that okay with you? Sorry to put you.
That's fine. No worries.
About 5 minutes? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys, part of the challenge with this stuff is lots of questions come in.
Right.
That next one, I'm going to talk about that next week. How do you explain a job you're in a long time but was not a good match with the boss? That's more of an interviewing question, not something you'd mention on the resume. So we'll talk about that next week. Someone has a great story here of a typo. I think there's a professional ghost hunter. Oh no, I get not a typo, but it sounds like a very interesting hobby of hunting ghosts. And I have a lot of stories like that where people got hired because they had something creative or interesting that created small talk. But would most people agree with that? Half the world would say that's crazy. Don't put that on there. But I have a lot of stories like that where if you have an interesting hobby, it sometimes can get you pretty far. The next question is the format you should usually send your resume is a Word document, a doc or a docx file. Almost every company can also process PDFs. I wish everyone just used PDFs because that you can't change the format, right? But so I would say Word or PDF is almost always fine. If a company can't read a PDF, you don't want to work for them. They're too behind the times. But if you put a gun to my head, I would say use a Word file. That is the most standard resume format people submit to people. Repeating keywords is fine, just as long as it's not obnoxious. I mean, if you have legitimate 3 places in your resume that you want to talk about your background in talent management, do it. But you wouldn't, of course, just list them repeatedly to where it's like, oh, they're just packing this with keywords. So again, just kind of use common sense on that. If you could do a job, but you don't have the experience, that's the bad news, where you probably won't get that job with a resume submission outside. I mean, I'd still try it, but it's unlikely, because resume-driven job getting is based on risk. It's based on companies saying, I've got 20 resumes, who is the least risky? And to them, the least risky who's done that exact job or is close to it before. So I'll say it again, networking just has to be an invaluable part if you're going after jobs that you're not really qualified on paper. You got to use LinkedIn and other tools to find friends of friends and get in there somehow. Otherwise, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying the odds are against you, because you will, most recruiters are pretty close-minded and they're just checking boxes. If you ran your own company, yeah, you bet, especially if it was for a long period of time. You want to mention you ran your company. You want to call yourself whatever title you can give yourself that most relates to your current goals. And of course, you want to stress whatever transferable skills most relate to your new career path. So with running your company, you can write whatever you want because you're your own reference. I mean, don't stretch it too far. But my point is, yes, you would put that, and yes, you would try to milk it for the relevant stuff. Cover letters, I don't believe, are usually scanned. They might be in some companies, but almost every recruiter I say says, I don't want a cover letter attached to a resume, and I'm probably not even going to look at it unless they ask you for one. If they ask you for one, obviously they want a cover letter. Okay, so I think I already answered. If you have a gap of 2 years, just mention something about had to take a 2-year break to get my work authorization. Now I'm fully authorized and ready to resume my career, or something like that. I think we talked about publications and presentations. The top question I'm going to answer next week. Sorry to go quick. I don't think with our 5 minutes. If you haven't worked in the US, you would just have to put the work experience from overseas and do all the same things I talked about tonight to the best you can. The trick on the top there, thanks for paying attention to my LinkedIn class. No, you would not list all those words after the title on a resume, because we did that on LinkedIn because it weights those words a lot more. You would do the thing where you convert a weird title to a mainstream title, but you wouldn't just list a bunch of similar titles like on LinkedIn. Okay. And then last but not least, I think we've got it. Time off to do schooling in a new career is not in the right career. I want to go back what you're doing. Yes, I would probably include the schooling if I needed to fill a gap, but if I did not need to fill a gap, I wouldn't mention that schooling if it was irrelevant to the career you're returning to, because it just wouldn't do much. But if it had any relevance to the career you're returning to, I would mention it down under the education sections. Okay, my friends, sorry, I think we got to just about everything. I hope that's helpful. I'll get the slides to UW shortly so they can upload them, and they'll have the recording. And like I said, there is no magic bullet for resumes. It's just following the 5 key rules and then making some smart judgment calls, and then recognizing it's what you do with the resume often matters more than the resume itself. That's sort of my big, profound takeaway. So thanks, everybody, and we'll wrap up there.